Welcome to the first ever University Boma event here at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. We're really excited to be here. I know a lot of people have been behind the scenes trying to make this event happen for a long time, and to see kind of a broader community kind of come together like this makes it really, really special. To give you some scope around the night and how we're gonna structure this a bit. So first we'll have a 4-person panel discussion centered around Mara's Good Chocolatier. Then we'll move into the student presentations. We'll have, I think, 4. We have 4.
That's right.
Yeah, 4 presentations tonight. And we have 3 select panelists who will speak, who are specifically chosen for each presenter. So they'll speak with their expertise on the individual student presentations. Then we'll go into a broader discussion at the end where we'll vote one of our student presenters to do a next Boma event.
So my name is Mara, and I'm the owner of The Good Chocolatier, and I'm gonna tell you more about it very shortly.
My name is Alan Shapiro. My background's in water resources, and among other things, I teach at SFU and at BCIT in sustainable business and in science communication.
Hi everyone, my name is Johan. I have a PhD in bioethics from the University of Zurich in Switzerland, and I have my own consulting firm working in science communication and communication for research, science, and higher education. And I think I was invited here to think about ethics and look at the pitches from an ethics perspective.
Hi everyone, my name is George Benson. I'm an urban planner by training, and I work for the City of Vancouver's Economic Development Agency. I'm the sector manager for the built environment there, so I work with a variety of companies involved in the construction, design sector, but especially from the perspective of how we accelerate the change to zero carbon building, ethical building, and low embodied carbon building. So I'm interested in the materiality of a lot of the pitches we'll hear tonight. Excited to be here, so thanks.
My name is Pauline Lai, and I'm a freelance UX designer, and I've been in the business for past 20 years. And I'm still teaching here for the interaction design and communication design program. I usually teach UX fundamental design research and also portfolio development. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kukai. I work at a venture capital fund called Pangea Ventures. So we invest in companies, science-based companies, utilizing materials to solve the world's biggest problems. So we invest across all the industry from energy, electronics, health, and sustainability. But all of that has to have materials as the core innovations. I think I'm invited here to do the pitch competition. So, which is what I do every day.
I'm Stephanie. Some people in this room know me. I started my first business when I was 12, and I launched my current business straight out of high school, which looks like a few years ago, but it was much longer than that. It is called Devil May Wear. We are sustainable women's clothing and lingerie made in Vancouver. I'm also super passionate about young entrepreneurs because I myself was one, and so I teach an SFU course in the Emily Carr building, which is concerning because I have no key card to anything. But some of my students from last semester are in this room right now, and they're so sick of hearing my story. I also work with startups because that's super exciting, and I'm really excited to hear the pitches. Thank you.
Awesome. So to start, we're going to have the panel discussion. So if we can have Mara, Kukai, Alan, and George come up here. I could kick it off, but I feel like it's good to be hands-off because I feel like we probably have a talkative group here. But if you can just kind of tell your story from the beginning, I think that'd be great. If we can start with Mara maybe and talk about the personal journey that you've been on, that'd be great.
Awesome. Hi. So again, my name is Mara. And I do go a little bit more in depth of the story, actually, because we take my business also as example for impact in business. And I want to go through the story of The Good Chocolatier and what it is, and then also my passion, which is community building, and it has happened to be through business now, because that's where I saw where I could make the biggest impact. And then I end with climate, and then open it up to people that do know more about climate action. So the Good Chocolatier, what it is now, it's a chocolate business. It's a good chocolate business, actually, because we make healthy, ethical chocolate bars, and we also improve the, build more inclusive communities by hiring people with autism. So how does it exactly work? The first part is really the health part. Some people don't really think that chocolate can be healthy, but we use single origin cacao beans that are fairly shredded and organic, and then we stay away from all kinds of preservatives, emulsifiers, and anything that can make a chocolate bar unhealthy and reduce the quality. So I also, just for you guys to test, I brought a few samples there. And so it's a 75% dark cacao. It's from Ecuador. And then it's sweetened with coconut sugar. So instead of cane sugar, we use nature's candy, which is coconut sugar, maple syrup, honey, or dates to sweeten them. So it's really just super delicious. It's good for your taste buds, but then also it's good for your heart and mind, which was tested that cacao is actually healthy. So you should test it yourself later on. This is one with coconut sugar and then bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup, and it's topped with some hazelnuts and also soaked in maple syrup. So key about this bourbon, actually, I don't want to go too much into it, it actually comes out more the days after, and I just made it yesterday, so you might not taste it super incredibly, but it is in there. So that's that part, that's the health part, and then the social enterprise part is there's many versions and variations of social enterprises. What we do is an employment-based social enterprise. So we hire people, any kind of barriered people to job markets, instead of investing in a large machine, basically. We decided that either one-time investment in a machine or long-term investment, everyday investment into people, and that was more important. So now Pulse Autism Society does all our packaging. That's how it worked. But the Good Chocolatier wasn't always a social enterprise, and actually wasn't the original founder. It was founded by Pierre Gruget, who is a French chocolatier. Some of his values were already so present in the business. And his key was, he was so concerned with the ethical sourcing of cacao beans due to the high amount of slavery and child labor, what's going on there. And so he was able to present that in the chocolate bar, and on top of that, make it very sustainable and healthy. So for me, at least, when I tried his chocolate, that was the most delicious I could eat, and I was also fascinated by everything that he put there in terms of values. So fast forward 2 years, I took over. Pierre went back to with his family to France, and so I was still studying at the time, and I wasn't really interested in business generally, and I wasn't studying business, but I saw that a lot of things that I did care about could be possible through business, like social impact, environmental impact, then with the chocolate, access to good, healthy food options, and then also maybe even the betterment of some business practices as we see them today. So I took over, and I was still studying at the time, which is community development and social change. And I was very frustrated with a lot of things that I was seeing there and I was learning. And luckily, it also brought some motivation in me to change some of the existing power imbalances, inequalities that we were seeing. So with that in mind, I kind of thought that the Good Chocolatier could be the perfect first step into the world of business by also allowing marginalized communities access better employment. And I really like this quote of Margaret Mead, which says, "An ideal culture is one that makes place for every human gift." And I think when we look at marginalized communities, really, we tend to look at their weaknesses rather than strength. And that's actually the core of community building, is seeing every individual with their strength rather than weaknesses. And in the job market, it's really so odd that some individuals we see like, oh, this you can do this, and that's what you're good at. And then we look at barrier people, but we are actually creating the barriers by looking at their weaknesses first. So that's something that I saw, and I didn't really want to take it. And then it was chocolate came into my life, and I was like, well, maybe chocolate, I can do something with it. So the first year I was just learning business things, and then the year after I actually slowly started to reach out to communities and see how I could integrate them. And also, so it's not only that they're looked at like with weaknesses, and they're evaluated by you can do this and you cannot do this. But there's so many things in a business that need to be done, and there's so many different tasks. And why don't we try to find something that this specific group would excel at and be better at than we would do? So that's the whole core of social enterprise. It has to be a balance. It needs to be something that improves the business and at the same time helps the communities. Yeah, so that was kind of just all talking about like community building and ethics, and I do want to say like a tiny bit on climate, but yeah, I guess we're gonna go more into that later. So it's not really the story of like climate action, what you see through the good chocolate here, but what it does tell is just an impact story, and doing something about things that matter. And we live in a world with so many opportunities, with so much economic growth, but we are also facing a lot of challenges like global warming, inequalities, and even humankind's and Earth existence in the long term. And so with our own, like, it doesn't really matter what it is that we care specifically about, as long as we do something about it. And business is a great way, or at least it was a very great way for me to make this connection. Yeah, other than that, yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and really also the general intent of this event, and that the students actually chose climate action organically is a very good sign of a generation that's a bit more self-aware and a little more world-aware, and also not afraid to take action towards the things that they care about and that are actually so pressing these days. And so yeah, I appreciate to be here tonight and to listen to these presentations, and then also the general evolving of Boma. I'm very curious to see that. So that's it.
Great.
So far.
Yeah, I was just going to cue you, Alan. As some of us know, Alan kind of brings a science perspective to this, and a water perspective as well, to make it as simple as I kind of can. I was wondering if there is a science angle within this journey that Mara is kind of sharing with us, or if not, is there some kind of angle like that?
Maybe I can provide a little bit of a link here, because I know we've got some great speakers to talk about the policy and the business angles. So why don't I try to frame this in a perspective of sustainability a little bit more, from a perspective both of the science around climate, but also the science around science communication, because I know that was mentioned a little bit and is really around climate change, one of our real big pressing questions. How do we communicate this, right? How do we take this moment in time and this issue that defines this moment, and how do we scale it? How do we get businesses and governments and people all rowing in the same direction? So from a sustainability point of view, it's so interesting to think about what a sustainable business entails, right? We've got our traditional notion of environmental sustainability as being core to a business, but also this increasing recognition now that we live in a time of inequality and social issues. And so this goes hand in hand with social and economic sustainability, right? And a business that has a great environmental record, but does that by perpetuating structures of inequality, right? Or does that by accenting the current gaps that we have, just isn't sustainable, right? So thinking about some of these things that a social enterprise brings to the table, right? It's this linkage between making decisions where you're looking at your supply chain and you're looking at the environmental impacts, but you're also looking at the social benefit that you bring And also you're planning a business that is fiscally and so I think this is so great, in part because you said you're not working directly on climate, but inevitably part of being in this communication space around climate is that we need positive narratives. And one of the things that we've learned in the last decade about climate is that, in my mind, it's probably the biggest science communication failure of, I don't know, the last 10 years at least, and probably going back a lot further than that. And the reason is that we've always thought, okay, look, research exists for a reason. Researchers produce a lot of information, and that information, when handed to the people, enables good decision-making. But what we're learning with science communication around climate change is this starts to break down when we face issues that are so big and so uncertain and so global and so abstract and so far in the future that it's really hard to get people buying into this tangible vision of what is the world they're trying to build. And I think the unfortunate byproduct of that is a lot of communication has become negative. It's become this focus on what is the future that we don't want. And there's only so far that that's able to push us. And so the sustainable business lens is a great way to look at the positive. So how do we build sustainability into our day-to-day businesses, into our day-to-day life decisions? So then it's not just about how can we drop what we're doing and work in climate, but it's about how can we build this new positive society, this positive association around business where we're considering environmental sustainability, social, economic sustainability, but we're doing so in a way that unites people, it brings people together, right, and lets people pull in the same direction. I think that's probably as much as I can offer there, so I'm gonna hand it over for the business aspect.
Discussing around what direction this can go in. We were thinking about, George, about how you might bring the rules side of things into this, and then kind of complementing that with Kukai, maybe bringing the kind of hope out of it that might exist despite the rules, or because of them. So, yeah.
That's a great provocation. You know, one of the funny things about speaking on panels, you always want to go first, right? Because then you don't have to follow all the smart people that spoke before you. The rules piece is really interesting. So I'm an urban planner by training. I did my undergraduate in political science. And so I'm like a rules guy. That's how I kind of see the world. It's like either how are the rules written, what are the rules that are written down, and in most cases, how can we build better rules so that we get the kind of outcomes that we really care about? I think one of the things, if you're trained in like government and that's kind of where you situate yourself, there's a tremendous skepticism around how business and laws interact with each other. You tend to think that anybody who runs a business is probably trying to skirt those rules or looking for the cheapest, easiest way to get around them. And the reality of having spent some years now working in economic development is that the business landscape is so much more diverse. There's so much more going on than just a bunch of the sort of corporate CEO you might picture who's who's scheming about how they're going to get around the rules. What I've come to think about in my practice in economic development is that there's a really interesting opportunity for a kind of dialectic between where businesses are going and what the rules could and potentially should be. So when I first started encountering the social enterprise landscape, it was a really interesting kind of provocation to me to start to consider the ways in which certain individuals and organizations are driving new types of practices that the rules haven't even started to think about yet. Right? Like we live in a country that has only just in the past 2 or 3 years really started to ask questions about what social finance looks like. Like how are we building financial institutions that can support different enterprises, ventures, organizations that have a social purpose in mind. We live in a country that still has pretty loose procurement rules for the public sector. You know, I think about one of the most powerful things we as a public can do is ask really tough questions about where we spend our money. And not our money as individuals, like what comes out of the back of my wallet, but when we think about a city like Vancouver that spends $1.5 billion in its capital budget, where does that money go to? Now, we're lucky to live in a city that has a social procurement policy. So someone's business like the Good Chocolatier would be in our list of things that we would evaluate. And in my organization, the Vancouver Economic Commission, we have a list of companies for all our catering, for example. So we preferentially buy from organizations that show that they have a series of metrics they can meet for social, environmental, and economic good. Now, what's interesting about that is that that's kind of a series of rules, right? Like we have some internal rules for ourselves that we're trying to follow and trying to model to others about how we spend our money and who we support and how we situate ourselves in that marketplace. But those rules aren't broadly accepted yet, right? Those rules are only situated in a very small organization, and we have great organizations like Buy Social Canada, for example, that are driving the creation of more and better practices around buying from social enterprises, triple bottom line organizations, et cetera, et cetera. But rules take time to make, right? And they're contested. There's no straightforward way. There is no best rule. It's dialogue, and as I said before, it's often a dialectic. We have opposing views that come together, and something, hopefully good, comes out of that coming together. We are in the stage now, I would say, on the government side in Vancouver, and certainly I think in many places across the country, where, again, we're asking these hard questions about how much better could our rules be, and where do those rules need to, where do we need to extend rules that maybe we haven't thought about in the past? If you talk to any procurement manager for a government organization today, they'll tell you or any procurement manager, that it's really tough to make a choice on anything other than cost. They need some other rules to tell them that they need to look for social, environmental, or economic benefit from who they buy to. So we need to change some rules for those folks. And I think that this conversation between business and government and science and policy, that's where we start to get those things. And forums like this are a great place for us to start to tease out those things. So I think I'll leave it at that as far as where the rules come in, but it's a great kind of opening place, and I'm sure Kukai will have some great pieces about what business is bringing to the table here as well. So thanks very much.
So yeah, again, bringing the hope side of it in. If you just kind of want to wrap this panel discussion up with comments on any of these, I don't know what the triggers were for you, but I feel like you probably have some ideas here.
Yeah, this might sound odd, but because we're living in the era where there's so many problems to solve, this is the best time ever to come up with business ideas, because you're actually solving problems here. You're not just coming up with ideas that is nice to have, but actually an urgent solutions to pressing problems by the world. So believe it or not, my past life before working at this current venture capital fund, I actually was working for a nonprofit. And so, there's like almost the opposite side of the spectrum. And I never thought in my life that financing, capitalism is going to be the driver for change. When I was working for the nonprofit, my job was to look for nonprofit organizations, social enterprises, to solve the world's biggest problems and giving them that funding. And so now translating my role, wearing a different hat, into a venture capital fund where we invest in companies hoping to make the biggest, most profit, like 10x out of our investment. I mean, never in my wildest dream I thought I would be working in the fund that I am right now. But I've been here for 2 years, and what I've learned is that this is going to be the key driver for change. When I was working for the nonprofit, I was selecting the nonprofit organizations, social enterprises that solve the world's biggest problems. What I'm doing now, I'm looking for businesses solving the world's biggest problems, but with the expectation for the returns. But because the problems are like so present today, the climate change touches on everyone, organizations, individuals, corporations. There's more business cases than ever. So this is something that I always kind of like to compare and contrast, even that, is pretty much the same, but a different lens. So, in terms of the business case, I think, like Merit is doing with the Good Chocolatier and, so many wonderful organizations, social impact and business becomes the same things. You can't make a business without creating some sort of impact in the world. And so with my job, when we look at companies like Clean Technologies and so on, they're already creating an impact. It's a matter of what extent. And that extent comes with the problems they're solving. So I'd like to give this example of a company that I assessed last year. So at Pangea, we're trying to assess opportunities with the impact lens. more than just sort of the financial returns, what they can make out of it. And this company was creating leather out of mushroom. So, we were thinking in our head, oh, wow, that sounds so impactful. There must be, actually a good business case here. So when we actually put an impact lens on it, we're looking at, okay, so what are they solving with this solution? Is there any sort of a water that is saved, energy that is, saved from it? In fact, making leather out of mushroom, you still need to take that to tanneries. So the tanneries is the most toxic part out of all. So, they're not really solving sort of the problems, and that becomes the business opportunities. And we're like, oh, if they're not solving, that big of a problem, then therefore maybe the business opportunity is not there. So, the business case and the impact case becomes almost the same conversation when we assess the business opportunities. One of the key sort of a question that was sent to us earlier was around sort of the local communities and how that kind of enables, innovations. And that's one thing that I kind of like to touch on today. When I moved to Vancouver about 3 years ago, I really was impressed by the city of how sustainable it is and how people are so sustainability oriented. They're looking for solutions for, green, purchases and so on. That is just not present at where I'm from. So I started looking around to why that is. And my conclusion for that is the enabling environment, is the government, is the university, is all these stakeholders that are creating and allowing that to happen. So, for any innovations to come from, I always say it takes a village to raise a child. It's the same thing here as well. It takes a village to really get the innovations out of the door. I like to, my last comment here is BC, actually, last year there was a clean tech list that came out. It's a global clean tech list. Out of the 100 companies, 10 companies are from Canada, 7 companies are from BC. And that's actually because this is a community that enables that. So, yeah, my parting thoughts.
Water is life. Lead pipes are a grave concern across the whole country. Most Canadian officials don't know where to start in replacing lead pipes, so the responsibility is on ourselves to take action. As we have seen in recent news that there's high levels of lead running through our taps and warnings even into pheno for boiling before consuming. For many cities, rain is a plentiful resource and should be recognized as precious. Much like a river or ocean's landscape, all these pinpoints across the world paint a view of the potential reach for this collaboration of need, art, and science. During my studies and observations, I managed to collect 3.5 liters of rainwater in just a few hours of rainfall within an extra large mixing bowl right on my balcony. While researching precedents of rain collectors, private, public, and city systems, I discovered many fabulous inventions, yet most of them did not have any filtration system built into its basic form. For Indigenous natives and earth keepers, water sources are considered holy. Water is sacred, and especially here to the Coast Salish people, water is ceremony and represents the interconnectedness of all life, the giver of life. With respect to these ancient ways, I've turned to the footprint and stature of a totem architecture, which could be scaled down to suit home use or scaled up for a community fixture. I do feel it's important for me to express a recent pivot point, which was rooted from prototyping personal balcony units. The initial thought process and research brought me to where I am now thinking of growing into more of a communal fountain. Going into my materials, hempcrete has been what I found to be the most curious and exciting material to use for this design. With just a few ingredients and some mixing, we have not only a durable and sustainable material, but it also acts as a carbon sink, giving back to nature in its humble place. If the hemp fibers are shaved down to a fine, the finished appearance could also be made quite refined and beautiful. The filtration process. was provoked from a discussion stemming traditional water filters using diatome ceramic vessels and a blossoming discovery within nanotechnology. We have been using ceramics to filter bacteria from our water sources since the early 1800s. Plasma and ceramics, however, make a unique combination for creating a filter that would rarely ever need to be changed. Clay dust, sawdust, and plasma all mixed together, molded, and fired will burn away the sawdust, leaving a porous ceramic form. The rainwater would then come into contact with the powerful plasmic components penetrated through the filter as the water passes through. This is an overview view of nanomaterials and what GANs is in terms of matter. Collectively bringing certain GANs together in a particular order generates a series of filters that clears the water but also mineralizes it into healthy, beneficial water. To make your own GANs, here is what the basic setup looks like for each material. The Quiche Foundation is an open source educational resource that offers lectures, studies, and links to many interesting setups such as these that are swiftly being shared across the world. Taking all the basic material to process your filters, this would be a step-by-step guide. In most cases, all your supplies are readily available and will not harm anybody if used respectfully. So ready to test are the following variations of molds that I'm also currently making additional ones in varying thicknesses, etc. I have played with many adaptations of the overall form of the rain collector itself. Wishing I could have slotted in a picture of my most recent ceramic prototype, I've experimented with capturing rain in a leaf-like structure that reaches off a balcony with a flex hinge, allowing the overflow to simply fall out of the pedal if it gets too full or if there's no longer room left in the reservoir. So the finishing details, the spirit of water. Since 1999, Dr. Masaru Emoto has led scientific experiments where he exposes water in glasses to different words, pictures, music, and then freezing and examining the aesthetic properties of the resulting crystals using microscopic photography. I would like the details of these studies to be illustrated using relief molds and carvings on the body of the whole rain collector. So moving forward, testing a variety of material combinations and qualities of the filter is definitely my next step. Hopefully having Health Canada's participation, full-scale prototypes of the rain collector, and sharing the resources for expanding and sharing the technology and design, making a decision on whether it's a community installation or a personal use.
And Alan, maybe you want to jump in.
Sure. This was really cool to see both from a science perspective, but also an art perspective, because obviously for me with my background in water science, often we're like, whatever. You know what? We'll worry about the shell of it later. So it's really cool to see how critical that is as you're tying it together. I'm curious, actually, a little bit more of a market question, but can you tell me a little bit about the market for rainwater capture? Like, where are you looking? And also, what's out there? And then, is it the fact that you're bringing this new aesthetic look to the table, or is it that the filter itself is doing something that filters aren't currently doing?
So definitely this project is a two-part. There's the aesthetic functioning of the whole form, and definitely from an artistic perspective, industrial design and sculpture. And then there's the second part, which is the filter. So in all honesty, the filter itself came in the stumbling of just knowing that I wanted to come up with a rain collector, and also living in an apartment myself, I thought, well, I want to be able to collect water, and I don't have the luxury of a garden or an open space. So initially, that's where I started the project, was how can I make something, design something that will fit on my balcony, that would have a reach across or off the balcony without hitting any overhangs from the building or foliage. So I kept hitting these restrictions, and until I started opening it up to realize that this could very well be a community meeting point. It could be more open to just a general, even if it was outside the school, people filling up their water bottles on their way in. So it became sort of I'm actually at a point where it can go either way. So in a commodity level, definitely as a product design, it would be very useful in a home use. There would be some areas of strata. I thought that I would hit some hurdles around that just because there's areas of how that would change the effects of the overall look of an apartment building. But then, yeah, so I hope that I've answered your question. I think there was more to it, but yes, I think it could be either way, and I'm at that point where I'm very open to the feedback.
First of all, I loved hearing that background story because this innovation started from a problem. I mean, we oftentimes comes across, solutions looking for problems to solve, but this actually started from a problem where you wonder yourself, how do I collect the rainwater? So that I really like hearing that background story. Sort of on the design and materials perspectives, I noticed that you mentioned that, these are available materials so you can just source and kind of just build it yourself and so on. I thought that was brilliant from the perspectives that, you're bootstrapping this, you're building this yourself, you're not doing something that is so sophisticated that you would need, getting additional fundings or whatever before you even get that proof of concept. So I think you're in that inflection point right now where you've come up with a design, you know that this is something that's going to work. You don't know who's the customers yet. You don't know if that's going to be the city, if it's going to be in the community, or it's going to be at the home level where, anyone can just purchase this and put this in their apartments, and how many people are in the apartments that, would actually want this. So I think you're in that inflection point now where you have this idea, this could be a product. So now you got to go out there in the market and see who can be your customers, who's going to be paying for the products, and how's the business model is going to look like. And no one can answer that. I can't answer that. The only people that can answer that is actually your customers. So you got to go out there and survey and look at what people want and where that majority of, the payers and the customers would be, and seeing how you can kind of go from there. If it's going to be parts, the community, the city, maybe then you can loop in some of the assistance or help from the city and so on. But my advice in going about to really launch this is to get as much help as you can and resources. There's a lot of available resources out there, whether it's going to be non-dilutive fundings, if it's going to be accelerator programs or anything like that to kind of just get started. So yes, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just touch on that by saying that it definitely, I think a lot of us, especially even Vancouver, we look at rain as just being so plentiful, and we can turn our shower taps on. In fact, I didn't have hot water in my building earlier this morning, and I really just felt that. But yeah, I think that we don't realize that our watersheds could be really under pressure, and many things can happen in a moment's notice. So to have these kind of ideas sort of percolating is a great social discussion as well.
We've got to wrap this one, but if you have we have a couple minutes, George, if you want to, yeah.
Just maybe really quickly, great comments, and I love this. I think there's, Alan said this at the start, the climate change and I would say even water issues in some respects are challenging because they can feel so intangible. The river's polluted, but it's so far, it's so big, how do I get a hold of that? You've got something that brings that home to people. What's interesting about, just a kind of a comment on potential applications, is we forget sometimes that the cumulative impact of a lot of these decisions can be quite large. So from a city perspective, from a utility perspective, as in like the sewerage utility, not utility, philosophical concept, there's actually a lot of use to having a lot of rainwater capture at the same time. It helps us protect our sewers from being overflowing. There's a whole variety of benefits that are associated with that. So there is a business case potentially on the level of the public side in preventing too much water from entering at one time, and as also cleaning that water. There's a giant cistern under Olympic Village that is actively cleaning the water and spitting it out into False Creek, cleaning that water before it even touches the ocean. That's a gigantic ecological and social benefit that's being provided. You've got a kind of distributed model of that. So think about this in its aesthetic opportunities, in its personal consumption opportunities, and in its kind of community and ecological resilience capacities. Because I think there's use cases for each of those, and if you can find a kind of triple word score of that, then you're in business.
Just like to add one short comment, I think maybe I missed it, but I think you say you tackle a problem, but I think you went very quick through the problem, and why should I care? I think there's obviously something, but to maybe put it in perspective, the water shortage, or why is that important, to very like push out your problem. This is the problem. This is what I'm solving, and this is how I'm going to solve it, and then obviously work out the finances.
Okay, I'm going to be really quick too, but I'm really passionate about water filtration. So listening to this, I felt like I had a little bit maybe
Water
more.
snob?
Yeah, it's really good. But so what I felt that was really unique about your pitch, I actually don't think you need to involve the lead pipes that much, because I think it distracts from the bigger possibilities. I think your unique proposition is catching rainwater in an apartment, because I'm in the same circumstance. I think that developing the aesthetics is also another great part about your idea, but the water filtration is such a big industry already. You've probably heard of Berkey and stuff, that you may not want to even tackle that market. Maybe a partnership with one of them would be a better idea, and focus on collecting in apartments. That's really good.
Okay, hello, good evening. My name is Madigan. I'm a fourth-year communication design student, and I want to thank you all for coming to attend this evening's event. My project is titled Kids Design for Bees, and it's designed to empower youth and create a conversation around bees. This project is in the form of a program for kids that focuses on key themes of bees and empowerment by putting on an art workshop. I'm currently developing the pilot of that structure. This project is driven by a profound love for bees and in-depth experience in working in childcare and youth programming, and working with kids with various needs and abilities. The current health of bee populations is a major issue that I think we need to address. Bees play a vital role in keeping the balance between other species in their environments. Bees are heavily involved in our food supply as well. So 70 of the top 100 food crops rely on pollinators for their production. And populations of bees and other insect pollinators seem to be declining. This is happening globally, but is most extreme in North America and Europe. Greenpeace put out a paper called Bees in Decline recently that opens up two major concerns about this decline in populations. One, that there's no firm conclusion by the scientific community of one thing that is causing this decline. There's multiple possibilities, such as diseases and parasites, climate change, insecticides, and industrial agriculture. Not knowing this root cause of bee populations dying out makes it difficult to address the problem in the most efficient way. And secondly, it brings up that as bees are used by farmers in agricultural production, the demand for bees in agriculture is increasing faster than suppliers can breed new bees. This could cause major food shortages in the agriculture industry. Problem space of this project has two parts. One, that bees are in decline, and if we don't actively address this, then we can't affect change. And the second part of this problem is that most of our youth are currently experiencing what can be called climate anxiety, emotional turmoil about their futures being uncertain. And this is caused by today's volatile social, political, and environmental climate. To address this problem, I'm proposing a workshop that's designed to achieve three main things: empowering youth, making meaningful change, and creating a conversation around bees and their impact. The end result of this workshop will be a unique product or art piece that will aid to protect pollinators in some way. I want to encourage a generation that is highly environmentally conscious and that brings that skill into the attitude of the way they live their life and the way they impact others. My solution can be broken down as a series of collaborative activities that position kids as partners in the design process. There's a lot of study into the value of co-creation and the way it can impact kids positively. And the Norwegian University of Science and Technology published an article that says when children are positioned as partners instead of subjects, they experience empowerment by giving them a voice and a platform to make change. The activities will be centered around bees, learning through making and questioning our world. A good example of a successful project of a similar nature was a project titled Big Rock Candy Mountain that was put on by two local artists, Hannah Jickling and Helen Reed. Through this project, they probed a group of students to work together around a theme to make a product or something. And the theme for this project was focused on candy and how it can function as a form of currency in communities of kids. The chocolate bar, the Sour versus Sour bar, which is pictured here, was worked on collaboratively by the artists and the kids in every stage of production, from taste making to naming and packaging. The products were actually produced and sold small scale. This project was important in causing a turning point from my direction It's an example of engaging kids in creative, fun, and inventive ways, and this method was contrary to what I was previously leaning towards, which was a more traditional educational approach. I'm currently in the process of developing the content for my workshop and the project. I've been doing research into co-creation pollinators in education since August, and right now I'm working on several activities that use different methods and mediums to engage the kids. One activity that I've been developing is a word association exercise that's designed to get the participants thinking in unorthodox ways. In that activity, working in small groups, they'd be given 3 unrelated words and tasked with combining them to create a new thing that they have to capture either physically or on paper. And the workshop in total, as it is now, could possibly take over 2 sessions that each approximately last an hour. I've reached out to a grade 5 and 6 classroom in North Vancouver, where I live, where I'm hoping to put on this pilot workshop in mid-February. I'm also working with a few teachers in the North Vancouver School District to make sure that the activities in this workshop will work in the classroom setting. The next step to my project is to complete the development of that pilot workshop, and the activities that I'm in the process of designing need to be refined and tested on example participants. After actually doing the pilot workshop, I'll need to analyze the way it functioned, if the participants had a good experience, and if the overall outcome was of value. What I'm hoping to engage you in today is an open conversation about the direction and development of my project. I want to get input on additional pathways to meet my goals in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Great, so we have George, Johan, and Stephanie on this one.
All right, thank you. Can I start? Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you for your pitch. I just have a couple of questions. One is, I fail to understand, how is the workshop itself going to save the bee decline?
So I'm not proposing that the workshop will be the one thing that affects that important change that will make it so they're not in decline. Through this workshop, I'm hoping to create a trend among our youth as they grow up to have this be at the forefront of their thought. So through that, impacting bees in a long-term way, to kind of bring the thoughts about how they can not negatively impact bees in their day-to-day life into society as they grow up.
And then follow-up question is, I think the same as from the first pitch, is where is the money? Like the workshop, it seems to me you can go and try it out, but how are you gonna like bank it and have either investors or people putting money in it, and who are your clients?
Yeah, so a lot of that line of questioning is something that I'm currently exploring. I don't have very concrete answers in that sector because I'm still doing the pilot workshop to test what things are of most value in the way that it could be scaled for longevity. So I'm not exactly sure where the project will lie and what its strengths will be, and that's kind of where I'm hoping to engage you in a conversation about that or kind of figure that out as I get that pilot workshop.
Yeah, I guess there's a different way you could do it, like a license from the workshop, and then try it out in different cities, yes. And then having it if the workshops take off, or then maybe sell it to a non-profit or to schools or whatever, because you're gonna wanna. If not, it's gonna be a one-time workshop. But if you want to make it like very sustainable, you'll have to think about it. Yeah, and I think you do need to think about it now for when you're gonna pitch to get some money. Yeah.
Unlike water filtration, I have no knowledge on bees other than supporting them. I really wanted to ask you about scalability, like how big do you expect this project to go and who'd pick it up? But I think it sounds like you're questioning that yourself. I think that you've got a great idea. I can't see it going wrong. It's a question of how scalable, but there's absolutely nothing preventing you from just starting it tomorrow. So I don't really think I have anything to add to that.
One of my best friends is a planner and a landscape architect and spends all of her time on pollination. I think there's a number of interesting use cases for something like this for different types of organizations. So the first company that comes to mind that might be interesting in something like this is Burt's Bees. Large corporates that have a very strong emphasis on social and environmental responsibility. They're looking to potentially show people that, like, look, hey, we have a product that is not negatively impacting pollinators. We've got the science to back that up, and we want to teach you how to engage with pollinators in a more active way. There's a potential use case there. I think it starts to you get to sort of the blurry edges of what constitutes a venture when you start thinking okay, is there a licensing model here? Am I offering up my services as kind of a public educator in different contexts. I can think of people who do that kind of work, and there's a niche there. It's a small one, but there is a niche. I think one of the things that you would really want to look at, I would suggest in your programming development, is what's the tangibility factor? There's so much cool research being done and work being done today on all of the various ways that we can support pollinators. There's controlled burnings for grasslands. You know, we're rethinking our physical landscapes and what it means to have a healthy landscape. Is it a big field of grass? Or is it brown grass that maybe we burn a little bit in the summer and then we let it reconstitute itself? And does that help pollinators, et cetera, et cetera? Giving kids that tangibility factor, I think, can really help drive not only because I work a lot on climate grief as well. Being able to feel like you're doing something, that's what people are looking for, right? And if you can offer that, you have a service that people are interested in. So I think nailing down what elements of potentially landscape restoration that you're offering these kids, that's something really critical. So I think, like I say, you've got a few different use cases there. I think you want to explore a number of those. I would say engage with the landscape architecture community. Think about corporates that are interested broadly in sort of landscape restoration, landscape management, and then start thinking about that educational opportunity with different nonprofits, schools, et cetera. You've got a few pieces there. Like both my colleagues have said here, I think there's very little chance of failure in the sense of getting this launched, but you do have, I see some potential to scale, but I think you really got to narrow that use case in.
Okay, fantastic.
Hi, my name is Pochin, and I graduated from Emily Carr as a film major last year. And the project I want to pitch is a documentary of Just Paper, and I will get into deep more about what's Just Paper. So, I think it's not a secret anymore that we purchase every day, almost every day, and every time when we purchase, we create waste, no matter what. You bought a coffee, you buy anything that you create a waste, even though you just wipe your nose, do anything, you create waste, and then it's not a secret anymore. But we do those things for essential reasons, and we do that because we need to do it. And lots of time we didn't even realize while we're doing that, we create waste. And actually, in my culture, where I come from Taiwan, but actually in lots of Asia countries, we have a paper called Just Paper, which I'm gonna show you today. From most of foreigners' eyes, because they and also like there's many different kind of design, not just one type, and then they literally put a single layer of gold on it. But what do we do with Just Paper? We burn it. Like we buy these products and we just burn it, and while we burn it, it's for a mourning process, because when our loved one dies, and we literally just burn it because we believe that in our culture, if we burn Just Paper, we can send the money to them, to our past loved relatives. They can have currency in their dead world, and then they can use this money to do something. And then, which make the business get into even further. Some people try to create some fake iPads, houses, guitars, everything that you think your loved one who passed away, they believe they can use it. So like, for example, one of your relatives really like playing guitar, so you buy a paper, like fake paper molded guitar, and then you just literally buy it and then you burn it. So you hope they will get it, which is, you can't like imagine this, but we do this culture in our lives. But why? I do think like in our cultures, when you believe that you can burn something and send it to them, if you can do so, why not, right? Like, it's just like, for you guys, you might think, oh, this is incredible. Why I would buy something? Literally, I spend my currency to buy something, and next step, just to burn it. But in our deep culture, lots of people, during this process, they were mourning. Like, they are grieving during this process, but they didn't know how much pollution they actually create. So look at this number. This is actually the number just in Taiwan, not even all the country where burns Just Paper. We burn this much paper and just the tree to create this paper is ridiculous. And making me think of the world today, which I assume everyone knows, the fires in Australia, California fires and everything. Actually, I think people think that's a way that nature gets back to us, but I do think we have responsibility for all of this. We so sad that the fire that in Australia that burns, but what about the paper we burn every day just for the morning process? And besides, actually just paper is not the paper only when your loved one passed away, you would burn. Some people, they try to make their business getting better, so when the business opening, they will burn just paper in front of the shop, hope like some gods will protect them. There's so many reasons to burn the just paper. So therefore, I deeply ask myself, and I come up with this sentence. Either way, we mourn, we sad about it, but we're still doing the things we don't even know we are doing right or wrong. And as an independent filmmaker, and as my major, my passion is creative films and media, because I believe video, media, films are the quickest way to telling people or to educate people in the quickest way and to distribute it. So I wanted to make a documentary about just paper to let more people know about what's just paper. And through thinking of what's just paper, we can make our actions. So here I say, despite the growing consensus on climate change, there are still many people who deny climate change or dismiss its human cause. However, even those who believe in climate change often don't do enough to prevent it. And so I really want to create a documentary about this and then to tell more people about the story of just paper. But I do come up with a really serious question, is documentary enough for us? Is everyone going to watch a documentary? So here is the question I kind of think of. A documentary is the quickest way to reach a wide range of people. It's an easy to consume media that doesn't require audience to leave the comfort of their home while providing a visual presentation of a topic. Nowadays, like Netflix is a really hype thing for people to watch at home. So more and more people watch a documentary at home than the days before. Like 10 years ago, I would never watch a documentary at home unless I'm in a class. There's some class that's telling me to do so. But I do think the way the media of documentary is changing now. Before, the documentary was really serious, have lots of interview of people and ask them questions, and you just hear them. Basically, it's like a lecture. But right now, the documentary on Netflix is not like that anymore. Like they will, through the narrative story, they will through so many different ways to telling you a really impact, powerful, and heart-touching story to telling you a story of a family, of a country, of someone, celebrity. So you get a more like touch with the story. Therefore, you want to watch this documentary and you actually learn something from it. And besides, right now people put a lot of animation in there now. So actually, more and more people watch documentary. But for me, I still think that's not enough to impact more people of noticing the problem of climate change. So here I have 2 questions for you. A, your friend asks you to go on the film fest and watch a documentary about the environment. After the film is over, while you set out to save the world? Or B, your friend sending you a link on Instagram to a horror show video about a cat trying to catch a fish, but the fish turns out to be a monster made of gross straws. Yes, so I do think documentary is a really good format and ways to distribute to the world what we're trying to say and we're trying to present. But also B, I believe still someone's gonna choose the A option, but I do think B in nowadays is the quickest way to let everyone knows about the information. So a few years ago, straws are really a bigger issue long time ago already. Everyone knows we use plastic, it's a bad thing, but not until there's a video of turtle choking with straws and like that. And the people started so impactful and so sad about those turtle size. So actually right now BC banned to use straws. The lots of restaurants they already banned to use plastic. I believe the action is from the short video just on the social media. It's not because of a film, of a documentary, of a climate change event. And right now, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, browser on their phone, and they commenting a lot, share a lot. They put their thoughts on that on the internet. So where I want to do here is like I want to make a documentary format, but I want to use social impact and other format to make a short horror film, for example, a short horror film about, or a shorter comedy, anything that's interesting to the teenager, because they are the biggest group of people that can impact this world. And when they share more, and the people will come through back to my original documentary, which make this documentary bigger. And that's what I want to do here, because I do think that's maybe a possible way to get more people's attention. And yeah, so what I need here is, because like I do think as an independent filmmaker, I have ability to write, film, direct, and crewing people to make a film, a media. But what I need is experts to actually telling me the numbers of the world and more source of the climate change sustainability, so I can get a more accurate information into my media productions. And also research, because like the number, I'm just telling you the number here, you would never know that's real or not, or that's just something I search on Google. So where I need to do more interview and a survey for the people who can give me more accurate information. And since I wanted to use a short social media format, I need to get people's information, what they would interesting to get to watch and so on, a crew. And yes, I want to use social media, but actually personally I'm bad at promoting a social media account or anything. So where I needed this help, I needed marketing to tell me, oh, how can I make a video hype just like a turtle talking by straw? And I do think that's the quickest way to make people change.
Thank you for your pitch.
I'm sorry if you can.
Thank you for your pitch.
Yeah.
Very interesting. How much money do you need?
I don't know yet, to be honest, because in the past I always do like small project as an independent filmmaker, so I never think of a big number. But I do believe the more money that I have, the bigger influence and the project it could be done. So, but I don't think I will give up. So I think no matter how much money, I do think I can create something with that amount of money.
I think that's my feeling is that you could actually start with nothing.
Yeah.
You could and you say there's something in your pitch. I think you need to make it a bit more clear, because you mentioned that the best way to do it's a short, funny, or scary video on Instagram, and yet your main pitch is that you want to do a short documentary.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking well, why? Let's just do the Instagram short story and you have major impact. So
Yeah.
I think you'll have to clarify that. You know what I mean? To distinguish.
Yeah, I think my original really thought is I want to do a documentary for whole thing about how this culture behind the Joss paper and everything. But I do think without any promotion, marketing skills, it's the chance that the people go to pay attention of the documentary is really low. So it's more like a trailer, if you could say it's more like a trailer and distribution to make people pay attention of the topic, and then eventually they will go pay more attention of the documentary, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But for me, it seems to me that I have a hard time to see the business model.
Yeah.
I can see you want to do bring social changes, and it seems to me you could do this writing opinion pieces on newspaper, submit it, and then get that change. But if it's for the documentary that you want to really push and have money, I think it'll be great to know hey, how much money do you need, and then we can do together. Maybe another way too, I don't know if it's possible, but to create this paper that is sustainable or whatever, to find an alternative. And maybe something you could also look at, I know now they sell those tree. If you pass away, instead of doing the traditional coffin and put you on the ground, you can just ask to have a tree.
Yeah.
And if you just Google it, you'll find that there's some business that came out of this movement. So you'll find maybe a workable business model.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think for the dross paper idea is good in a way you target the younger generation,
Yeah.
because the old generation, because of the religious and also a ritual, it's very difficult for them to change. And it will continue until certain point that the new generation come up and try to change in that way. That's, I think, the Instagram or even the social media can help. Not only Instagram, there are so many other ways right now. But for the main feature theme itself, what is the outcome you want to come up with the theme? What do you want? Not only showing the history or the storytelling about the dross paper, but what kind of outcome you want to come up after people looking at it or watching it? What is the outcome you want?
I think I didn't present really clear before, but I think what I'm trying to do here is, because the most formatted just media or anything, it's just telling people what's the fact, what's the number, what's the, how can I say, what's the thing we should do now. Like, you should change the world, you should be more sustainable, you should stop using plastic bag. But I do think the people who can get it, they will just get it already. They don't have to watch a piece to get it. They already have so many sources they can get it. This is a bad thing to do. So what I want to do is like use a different way to intrigue people. They didn't even realize they are changing. So I was just really short about talk about like a few months ago, I tried to make a short horror film, and it's about a woman who really likes eating fish. Eventually, she becomes a fish and eat herself. It was really gross, where I'm not gonna put it here. It was super gross, but I do see people put on a comment on my social media says, well, I don't think I will eat fish in the next few months anymore. And I do think, well, I can actually, just because a really short piece of film, I change people's changing without telling them, hey, maybe you shouldn't eat fish, you should be vegetarian, you know? So I do think maybe use this kind of way. I would create the documentary of something with directly telling you what you should do, but with a narrative or with characters in there, and telling you, influence your mind and make you change in action that without you even notice. I think that's the outcome I want.
Alan, we got to wrap this. If you got some last comments here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love the concreteness of this from a communication perspective, that you're really giving a physical symbol to a much bigger problem. I would say there was a great point about audience, where your audience really isn't older generations that have this ingrained. It's younger generations who aren't as attached to the custom. So think about how to reach them, even if that means you're not reaching more established audiences. That's fine, because they're not the ones who will change their behavior.
Yeah.
And think about how to focus the narrative, because I know you said, here's this moment in time, we've got all of these problems. But in reality, like, just even the symbol of fire and climate change is so powerful. You can probably take a bunch of those narratives out and just focus on the symbol of like fire and burning around that. And I think that's a very powerful story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I love to cook. When I moved to Vancouver, I was excited to see the variety of vegetables and fruits to choose from. However, through my education, I realized something. We never really stop to think about where it all comes from. Everything is within our reach, but what is it discounting or hiding in the process? And I started looking into food, combining my love for it with my interest in design and change through design. Take a banana, for example. They're grown in the global south. They're cut while unripe and transported in refrigerated containers overseas, and the ripening is artificially induced. Then we buy a banana. We eat it still under the assumption that it is fresh, and if we don't compost it, the banana ends up in the landfill. Here's some of the hidden implications behind the banana's value chain. Looking at this, it's a fair question. Why are we not realizing that the impact of our actions and choices are huge? This is where my project Sprout comes in. Sprout is therefore a global network of self-sustained communities and schools that engage and act on rebuilding relationships with food. For example, University Club, a student-led or faculty-sponsored community group, possibly either independent or formalized by the school. It empowers individuals to rethink ways purchasing power can impact economies and the environment. Situated in principles of meta design and rooted in locality and context, these communities would bring people together to learn from each other with curated resources and act on those learnings to build change collectively. You know the common saying, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach a man how to fish and he'll eat forever? Meta design takes it a step back and provides an individual with the tools and resources to make the fishing rod. It's about giving agency to the users. It's about designing the design process itself so that the users can design their own solutions. As a designer, you provide users with the context and then leave it up to them to make and solve however they deem necessary based on their unique situation. And we need meta design in this case because the required knowledge to solve complex problems is beyond what just one individual or discipline can achieve. It isn't about delivering pre-digested information to individuals, but about providing the resources for social debate, discussion, and collaborative knowledge construction, similar to how we're gathered here today. And it's simple why food is an important topic. We all need it for sustenance, but it's being taken for granted. It's estimated that the world already produces enough food to nourish 14 billion people. That's double our population. And why? Because globally, a third of the food produced is thrown away after purchase or spoiled during production, preparation, transportation, and sales. I truly believe that if consumers change their interactions with food, it can impact the entire life cycle. What we demand is what is supplied by farmers. If we start buying from a certain vendor, for instance, it will impact how other vendors sell their products. So here's how meta design can be incorporated to establish ways consumers can help impact the food industry. A toolkit, which is still in progress, provided to each micro-community. The toolkit shows the different stages of the life cycle and related themes. It will be available to communities as a web resource. Each community begins by identifying themes that suit their context best, views resources, ties it all together, and starts engaging in conversations geared towards designing solutions. Before this toolkit can be shared with communities, it goes through 2 stages of meta design. The first stage is design time, when the needs of the user are anticipated and designed for. The context is designed along with other individuals in a collaborative process. In this stage, I will be holding workshops and activities at Emily Carr. I would begin by under-designing, which means to intentionally design less, as a way of getting people to engage with the research I have gathered and document themes and concepts that emerge from discussions. It is also an unself-conscious design process, as no idea is set in stone and is open to be changed. So the themes that I discovered in my research can either prove valid or be completely removed from the toolkit. The diversity of perspectives and openness of the framework is important going into use time. Use time is when this toolkit will be implemented by universities and even schools. What they will create and how these discussions follow is up to them. While developing this framework, I looked at precedents that operate at a similar level. Slow Food is a global organization that combats fast food culture. Similar to their initiatives, Sprout encourages discussions in self-built communities. Fair trade advocates for better working conditions for farmers that grow sustainably farmed produce. And by providing resources such as this, Sprout communities can take actions in existing campaigns and even build their own. So currently, I'm conducting the design time workshops, following which I will be building the final framework and toolkit. Some of my needs from you would be intel on university infrastructure and ways to connect communities locally and globally. And at this stage, all feedback and suggestions are welcome, and I would love for you to keep following the project and hopefully implement it in the future.
So first of all, I really love your presentation. It was very precise and well presented, a lot of visuals. I did have complication understanding if like Sprout is your project and that's the meta design is the method of how the product will be used. Okay, cool. And then another question, so are you looking at geographic communities like universities or, okay, specifically universities, you want to give it a try?
Yeah, I think to start with, universities and maybe even schools would be a better place to start because there's already organic communities that form. And it would be hopefully at a global level, starting locally. And yeah, Sprout is basically the whole network and then who engage on food.
Yeah, I love the idea, and I think it's already happening in a lot of spaces where communities stick together, where it's basically like a community building area with this many families and whatever, and it's specific enough that there's a long-term result and people actually want to contribute because they're going to benefit from the long-term result that they're creating. I think we live in a time that it's very difficult to have that community stick together and people move in and out of places, come to university and go away and then come up with new ideas and do want to eat a banana even though you can't grow it here. So it's like, what's the container there? It's like just try to, I think, start with a place where it's easy to imagine, oh, this can work, just because there's so much like moving around happening. And then will that completely replace you going to a grocery store, or will it just be an adaptive to it so that we can kind of reduce and choose and use that as educational piece as well. So some just clarity things, but I do love the process, and I think the education piece is really important also, that people are aware of the whole supply chain. Yeah, so I hope that helps.
I love the idea. I love the pitch. I do have a lot of questions because it sounds like the beginning of an idea and not, I'm wondering what the resolution is. Like, what is your expectation?
I think it's just to get people to start talking about these issues and then finding ways that they can do it for themselves rather than relying on...
And what is it?
I think it's mostly just about thinking about what we're eating, where we're eating it from, why are we doing this, and actually just having a more personal relationship where we know exactly by eating a banana, what are the practices that we're contributing to.
Yeah, like really understanding farm to table to soil. Do you actually need resources to get started on this? Or can you just start it yourself? You're already sort of doing a beta. Are the resource requests necessary?
Yeah, I don't, like, because the thing at Emily Carr is just about building the actual toolkit, but yeah, I'm not really sure how to formalize the structure of the community. Like
maybe more like mentorship on how to activate something like this. Cool. I'm also curious, are you interested and committed to doing this outside of this sort of process? Because I get the impression that you're really passionate about this. Okay, cool, awesome.
So is the workshop your deliverable for your project, or what is your main deliverable?
Yep, I think the toolkit that will be informed through the workshops is my deliverable, and then it'll just be given out to anyone who's interested in talking about this, and that's where my role ends and their role starts, about actually engaging with the conversations.
Great, I think it's a great idea, because I think Canada is one of the biggest food waste country, or even Vancouver is one of the biggest cities. It's a lot of food, so great idea, and I think it will work. Just have to figure out how to make it the deliverable, to how to spread it out in the community.
I didn't mean to take that from you. I just wanted to signal. I want to add to it that it is a great idea and there's no downside to it. But how do you make this an idea with longevity? Like, how do you pass this on to the next generation? Where does it carry on from you? So that's something you want to build into the infrastructure somehow. I love the idea with engaging. It's like a live documentary, but how do you make it bigger than yourself? That's a really big question for you.
I think it's how you're going to manage, if you are not the only one who's doing it, how you're going to pass it to, like, at the same time, you got workshops around the city or even around the country. How you're going to make that work? Because you as one person, it's very difficult to manage the whole system or the whole community, because it's going to build can be quite big. So think about how you structure it in a way that you can scale it in different way, basically.
No, all good. Yeah, scalability is definitely a thing, but the toolkit, as soon as you start applying it, I think with small groups and go bigger, I think you will figure it out actually how you can scale it, and if you can just make a video out of it and send it to another university, and they can do the same. So I think testing it is just a good start.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we can have all the panelists come up to the front for this last portion.
Well, okay, one word that I heard a lot was scalability. So if we're going to kick off a conversation somewhere, that might be an interesting place to start, because this was a great point that Johan brought up. It's actually 4 projects, all of which seems like they could launch now with no funding and just be run by the knowledge and the passion of the pitchers. So first of all, congratulations on bringing that to the table. That's super cool. But thinking about scalability, what is the next step for each of these projects, and what has the ability to link into bigger picture action? So that's an open-ended question.
Okay. So I do have a favorite, I think, just because it was the most tangible, and I could relate to the problem itself, and that was the water filter. Just because we have so much rainwater here, and we're really not doing much with it. And also, City of Vancouver put up this Rain City strategy, which there is a lot of effort being made. And I myself grew up in a community, and we were actually flushing our toilets with rainwater, so it didn't need to be filtered. So I think it's so good to have. And then the whole issue of water filters, you have to buy the Brita over and over again, like where you create waste, but you filter water. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I really love the idea. And I think funding would help you a lot, actually, because it's not just a small thing. It's not like, it's not a workshop style, it's actually a product. And the more resources you have, if you have a number of whatever money you would need, it could actually kick off the product quite well. So that's what I would choose.
I'm going to second that. And the reason I want to second that is I actually think the other 3 projects would do better if they started without funding. And I know that sounds like a painful thing to hear, but all those projects, all 4 of them, are passion projects. But I think that the bees, the food, and the documentary still need to discover their soul. And I think that's where they're going to really grow and sprout. And I agree that the water is a tangible project that could be scalable and funded. I think that you really need to narrow your focus in it if you want that to happen, and you probably need to talk to this guy.
Add something to? Yeah, I think you'll have to think also like, how do you measure success? It doesn't matter if your business goes global. Like if you, with the Jan's paper, how do you say the first? Jess paper. If you happen to have one person, I don't know, in politics where it happens and they change or whatever and it changes, then it's done. So then you can measure success in a different way. Same for the workshop. For the bee workshop, if you have like a couple of workshops here, if they grow organically and go across the country, it's great. But you can have one workshop and it's fantastic. So it's also how we measure success. So all of that to say that I think they're all like grassroots movement, and you can just start and you should keep going at it. And I also think that for Boma Global, I also recommend the water filter. Yeah.
One thing I want to like dwell on, because I felt like this was a theme running through a lot of the projects, and I want to push back a little bit on a kind of theory of change. So there's, and maybe Alan might want to pick up on this theme a little bit as well. But I come from like a very working class family. I'm the first person in my family to have a university education, master's degree. My family's really busy. They spend all of their time working, right? They spend all their time cashing a paycheck and they really believe in doing their best, and they'll be the first to tell you how much they compost and how much they recycle. They really care about that stuff. They care about the tangible good they do in the world. They struggle in a very like open and like transparent way. They communicate this a lot about how to make a difference on these big picture issues like climate change. And I think all of these projects are raising these big systemic issues. And what's interesting to me about that is that I think the three projects, except for the water one, I think are all pointing to this idea that if we educate people, they're going to change something. They're going to dive in and they're like, yes, I'm going to do it. And I think that's true to an extent, but I always use my parents as an example. They care a lot and they will communicate that endlessly. But when it comes to knowing and having the information to go into a grocery store and make an informed decision about what vegetables they should buy or what things they need to take home with them, there is a tremendous amount of information they need to have, which they don't have access to all the time. And there's a huge amount of labor and time that goes into making those decisions. So I think that we have to be careful in assuming that presented with the right information and presented with, especially when people are presented with a whole bunch of information, right? Because if people are learning about pollination and food and waste and climate change and social equity and, it's really difficult for them if they're a person who's just trying to get by to make a decision that's going to be effective. Particularly when we know that to find a product, let's say, that is the true triple word score, it is completely ecologically sustainable. It is completely socially responsible in every respect and has a positive return on investment. That's a really, really hard thing to get to. That is our goal. Like as an economic development agency, I can tell you right now, that's what we want our economy to be. But it's a very difficult process to get there. So I think that to sum that up, I think focusing in, and I feel this was reflected in everyone's comments, focusing in on that tangible piece of information and the action that someone can walk away for all of the projects, really narrowing in what's that one thing you want someone to do after they've engaged with your product, whatever it is, workshop, network, documentary, physical asset that they're buying. What's the one thing you want them to do afterwards? And if you can communicate that to yourself and to your audience, you're in business, literally and figuratively. So I think nailing that down is really going to help all those projects make sure that they're achieving the kind of change that we want. Because I'm probably on like 50 different mailing lists. I get a ton of information every day. I am overwhelmed with that information. And I try my best to make a good decision, but it's hard. So I think, again, nail that one action down that you're looking for people to take and to what people you want to take. Is it the politician? Is it an everyday consumer? That's really going to help drive the impact of your project. And I think, as I said, any one of these projects can really succeed if you have that.
So first of all, I think what I like to admire is that all the projects today comes from passion, and you can feel that, and I think that's what everyone here is agreeing as well. It started from a passion. I think the reason that the water company project, the technology, is more interesting for Boma is because that's already packaged in a product. The rest of the project that is presented today, you're onto something. You're onto something for sure, but you haven't packaged that in a product. And, and that's something that I like to kind of encourage you to explore. How do you package that idea into a business, essentially the product that you sell, whether if that's going to be for the, schools, for universities, for, communities, for whatever it is, you have to figure out how to package that into the products. I think everyone laid out quite well why they want to work on the project. But I think a better way is to tell the story of how big the problem is. You said you're passionate about, certain problems and so on, but you need to be able to tell the story. This is X amount of, this problem is this big, and this is why you should care about it, even though I may not be the customer, but this is a business opportunity because it's this big of a problem, and that's going to be the customer pools there. And so that's something that you can kind of help build the business case. Even though you don't have the products that ready to be launched in the market, you can always talk about, your market studies, what's out there, comparative case studies for growth. So we can kind of get the idea of, this is the direction that you can take. So, yeah.
As a UX designer, I always think about users. Who is your main users? So when you look at it, it's like it can be a city, it can be a community, it can be a group of people, a target audience. But all this affects your project tremendously. So you have to find out at the beginning, who are you targeted? You have good ideas. A lot of you have great ideas. However, sometimes, like, you don't have a product is aiming at certain people. It's very difficult to sell something like it's a general idea. It's not even packaged yet. And I also like the water filter idea because it's already kind of, I know who it is for, even though it can be different customers to buy it, but the idea is to the usage of the water filter, and it can be done right now. Other projects is great, but in the long term, like talking about like education, community, that is great idea. But I didn't see the content of the workshop, which I will be very interested in what they are going to be in the workshop. It can be packaged in a very nice package with maybe the toolkit or maybe the workshop. What is the content? What kind of process inside the workshop? And that helps a lot when you need to sell it to maybe some fundings or when whoever wants to invest to your project. So I think the focus will be, who are you designing for?
Even if you don't have tangible products, I encourage you to think, what does success look like for you?
Yeah, I think that too. There's a lot of problems that can be solved without having a business or a product. Like for instance, with the straws, the plastic straws, to solve the problem is just not to use straw and to just drink like water or whatever without a straw. You don't need like a renewable straw to solve that problem. So it's easy, and then you've solved that problem. So just to think about this too, like how are you going to solve, you identify the problem, how are you going to solve it? And then if you want to do a business, and we talked earlier about non-profit for profit, someone mentioned it. I think you can also create a non-profit that is profitable, that is sustainable and makes money. I like to give the example of FIFA, the headquarters of the World Soccer Association. It's a non-profit, they make billions. So it doesn't matter like the legal structure of it. Food for thoughts.
Okay, great. So to wrap, should we have Scott come up and say a few words? This is Scott Mallory Jr., the organizer. I was wondering, what do you think?
What if Boma Canada were to weigh in? Which one would be viable for a summit, for a Boma summit? We know that they're all viable to some extent, but now we want to talk about the context of actually sending that to a Boma summit in hopes of scaling this across exactly Canada or the network in some way. There you go.
Okay, thank you. And as I'm eating my treat. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Weiss. I'm a co-founder with Dan of Boma Canada. Let me actually just take, I'll say the sentence of what Boma is to give context to my answer. So Boma, we're all about convening discourse on the topics that are shaping our world. And convening this conversation so that you get different perspectives and see the issues from new lights, and you also build relationships to then go and say, okay, great, I understand the problem a little bit better. I have partners from all walks of life and not just sort of my silo, so that I can go and take action. And that then allows us to solve some of the bigger challenges that we're facing today. What I like about tonight is sort of this contrast where last night we had a conversation on the future of Vancouver, and various city builders were talking about all these issues, and they were all talking about, okay, well, what are we going to do about it, right? And how do you make change? And here tonight there are 4 tangible things to say. This is how we'll get at the environmental issues, this is how we'll get at social issues, etc. And I think that's going to be really interesting as this community builds to connect the decision makers and folks that are identifying issues with practical solutions. And so my verdict is on the water solution because I see that I'm stealing this, is the triple word score. There's community. I could see myself going and filling my water bottle there. There's environmental, and then there's economic pieces, right? So you have that triple word score, and it's tangible. it's something that says, great, I can see myself putting that out on my balcony. And then with the other ones, what I would encourage is, do you want me to, I'm just gonna go for it. On the Joss paper, I love it. And I actually would go for the documentary because I think you can get people to question what do they hold dear culturally that then reflects that is similar to a Joss paper that we can then question our dogma. And I think that's a very powerful thing, is to question your dogma. And I think you show that in the Joss paper. On the bees, what I would suggest is actually don't just get people to think about, don't get children to think about it today and then how do you do stuff in like 10, 15 years when you're an adult, and can get them to do something today. Get them to solve the problem today. Figure out how in the workshop they leave and they have addressed the issue. And then with the, which one am I missing? Pardon? Sprout. I think it is really important to think about the full chain, and I would encourage you to use language and concepts that are a little bit more accessible. I'm not from the design world, and I have to admit, I got it, but I didn't fully get it. I think that you'll have a lot more impact when you say, yo, do you understand where your banana came from? Let's talk about that. And then just break it down for me in like 5 words, kind of, like straightforward. So that is my verdict, and is my input. And thank you everyone for coming in and joining. This is good to have this community together.
Terrific, and also, thank you very much. And also, all of the projects will receive strategic support. You all will have a chance to participate in that if you want, either through the form of an online group or other micro gatherings that could unfold from this. So we will update you. What else is significant is the projects that could emerge among you all by connecting. So we do still have some time on the clock, some snacks left. Feel free. Thank you very much, friends.